these ancient ancestors did to put them in the positions that
That's
they are in now, and now it's their time to take the agenda, which is an old ass agenda forward to the next step. And so, we can jump over to another, of these modern day oligarchs. We've talked a lot about, sort of the politicians and so on, but what about some of the billionaires?
Sure.
And of course, really, I'm doing this a disservice because anybody who's going to get on TV, right? Anybody who's a publicly known about billionaire, they're not really in the class of people that Tarpley was referring to, but we have to sort of point the finger,
follow the breadcrumbs a little bit,
right?
Still. Yeah.
So this is an interesting one because it's Bill Gates.
Yeah.
And people laugh when I say it, but I always try to throw the logic back at them, the climate change logic, and if people are edging towards agreeing with some or the other logic that comes out of the United Nations, right? I just go whole hog well, I don't know if the carbon emissions and regulating Freon is the best thing. I think they should focus on the real issues like cow farts, and I'll say it with a dead serious face. And they're like, oh my God, it sounds so ridiculous. And then I'll follow up with a link to one of these, very serious, purportedly scientific people talking about cow farts for real. And it's, to me, I see it as ridiculous. And it's funny to see people's reaction when they actually, no, it's not me making a joke. That's one of the things that they actually really talk about.
Well, and then, you can also take it to the authoritarian extreme. That's really not adequate. We really need to be taking away people's houses. We need eminent domain laws. And
they really show their colors then at that point, right?
Right.
And that's my way of sort of reverse psychology, sort of ferreting it out. But anyways, check this out.
Yeah.
New York City is going to be built every month for the next 40 years. What does that mean? Is that good or bad?
Well, I use that as an opportunity to explain that when people think of climate change, they think mostly about electricity. And that's only a quarter of the emissions come from coal, natural gas plants that are generating your electricity. When we make materials like steel and cement, those two alone are about 1/8 of the emissions. And so the fact that we're going to build these cities, that the world is urbanizing, means that unless you have a totally zero-emission way of making steel and cement, then you haven't come near to solving the overall climate problem. And so moving away, the term clean energy has handicapped the field because that makes people think, oh, maybe it's just electricity and passenger cars, and they don't see agriculture, industry, buses, trains as part of the problem.
One crucial part is agriculture, and one thing you said you were particularly surprised by was how great a problem bovine flatulence is. Do you want to explain what that is and why it's a problem?
Yeah, so the animals that can eat grass have very unusual stomachs that have these bacteria that are methanogenic in there, and so they leak natural gas, both out the front and the back. And so people have said, well, let's change the hay or throw some things in there. And nobody knows how to get rid of
No one knows how to get cows to stop farting.
Exactly, or burping. And so there is artificial meat, but that's at a very early stage. But that's another big source of greenhouse gas emission. So, I'm just trying to make sure that the people who acknowledge the problem, which I think is fantastic, that they understand the breadth of innovation required before you can get anywhere near to what we have to do, which is zero. If it was a 50% reduction, then you could ignore, okay, leave the cows alone. But because we're trying to avoid the temperature continuing to go up, you do need to go to zero. Otherwise, you're continuing to have temperature increase.
You threw a...
Whoa, sorry again. Got to fix that. But
Wow.
so he says we got to go to zero. We got to go to zero. 50% isn't enough. That's repeating the Greta Thunberg number, right? Just more chartism, right? Just
Right.
throwing numbers out there, acting confident and credible. No, he knows nobody's going to look into whatever he's saying. They're just going to kind of feel it out. You know,
It's just neo-Malthusian gobbledygook, basically.
but he is talking about cow farts. They leak methane from the front and the back, and you're supposed to be worried about that. And he tries to really spin it and make it reasonable. And at the end of the day,
Makes him sound so insightful and considerate. You know, this is a real issue, guys. It's laughable. I mean, it's totally in line with the whole Sarpy Malthus scarcity psychosis, where, oh well, you know, it's good for me to have sprawling, environmentally obtrusive campuses and houses, but it's not good for thee, you masses who I kind of despise and don't really interact with day to day. So you need to really get this number down to zero, and maybe the best way to do that is for y'all to maybe eat grass and, you know, just don't reproduce, and maybe in a few generations, you know, we will have prevented another couple billion people from even being born.
do you notice
we'll be on the right track
do you
there.
notice how in his speech pattern he's already sort of living in a world where the control over how things are built, he talks about if there was a way, you know, to build with concrete and steel that was zero emissions, you know, we would do. And it's like he's already anticipating that you are a subscriber to the religion of climate change and that emissions,
And all
this obsession with the CO2 molecule emissions, and you have to buy into so much to be on that level,
Right.
before you ever
man.
get on that level, right? You have to buy the whole thing.
It's a package deal. You have to adopt the whole Terraqueous orb religion and everything that goes along with that. That, you know, the resources of the earth are more or less fully cataloged, and all of its dimensions are known. And, you know, if, you know, we're just continuing to up our numbers, and, you know, what are we gonna do? And we just can't do this any longer. I mean, it's this kind of contrived panic button that they're trying to push in everyone's face, and, you know,
Right.
have people adopt this, you know, idiotic acquiescence to this adolescent authoritarianism, really. And it's not just Greta Thurnberg either. I mean, it's a long line of spokespeople that have been beating this misanthropic drum for really centuries, if not close to a millennia now.
But they have, you know, as was talked about by Tarpley, you know, not only the genocidal tendency, but this line of thinking, this monopolization of science, the topic of science, goes way, way back. And
way back.
it, you know, and that the genocidal tendency sort of feeds into the link with authority.